right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to another episode of IT Pro TV. We are back once again with another episode of Project Management, and not just another episode, an all-special final episode. Yep, we are winding things down here for the closing process. So this is a pretty exciting moment, right, Ronnie?
It is an exciting moment. I have tears in my, no I don't.
Tears in your beer?
Yeah, tears in my beer. That's right, tears in my beer.
All right, well, the closing process, it is the last process that gets or the last process group tackled by the PMBOK. And I guess I closed my PMBOK down, so let me fire that up. But it's also one of the most underrated of the processes, the one that gets skipped the most, and that we'll see here is a little bit dangerous. When your project is moving along, one of the last things we think about is closing, and that's when we wrap everything up, we tie up our loose ends, and we close the doors. So we only have two processes here. This is nice and small. We've got the close project or phase and the close procurements processes. Now, close procurements, that's talking about contracts. There's not a whole ton there. You'll find there's not a whole ton up here in close project or phase either. This will probably be our shortest episode on record because there's just not a ton here. And that's part of why this process group gets ignored so much. All right, now the problem we have is if you ignore closing, you can always leave loose ends in your project. So that's why this is so important. We're going to take a look at what's involved. The first thing I want to point out is the name of the process. We've got the close project or phase, right? It didn't used to be like that. If you've gotten certified under an earlier version of the PMBOK, this may have just been called the closing process. And they added that or phase part to remind you that the closing process can be used not just at the end of your project, but at the end of each phase. And so it's not really closing altogether. You're closing one phase and transitioning to the next. So when we were done with initiating, we would actually close and then go to planning. And then we would close the planning phase and then go to executing. And then we would close executing and then go to full closing, and then that would be the end. So you're actually going to the closing process group several times throughout your project as we transition from phase to phase, right? As we move through those different stages of our project. So that's a little, I guess, counterintuitive based on the name. Closing, you think it's just the very end, but it might be the end of an individual phase. All right, now what is involved in the actual closing of a project or phase? Well, what we're doing is we're taking any loose ends that we have and just wrapping them up. By this point, our controlling is pretty much done all the heavy lifting. When we were controlling, we did things like validating our scope, right? We made sure that the deliverables people were providing us with met the requirements of our scope. And in our control quality, we were checking there too to make sure we validated our deliverables and then we made accepted deliverables out of it. So by the time we get here, we've already received whatever it is that we were asking for. So if our project was to build a house, the house should be done.
Right.
Quality control should have happened to already say, yep, these are our validated deliverables. The validate scope process would have kicked in to say, yes, this house meets our needs. Everything's on here. We're good to go. All right. So our primary input for closing the project is going to be the accepted deliverable, right? But if we're closing a phase, the deliverable is something different, right? When we wrapped up initiating, what was our primary deliverable there? A project charter. The project charter is what gave us authority to be able to move forward with our project. It was the most important document in the life of our project, and that was the deliverable. So as an input to closing the phase for initiation, it would be that project charter. If we don't have that, we're not ready to close initiation. We're still in initiating. When we closed planning, what was our important thing? The project management plan, which is an amalgam of a ton of different plans, right? But that was our main output. If we didn't have our plans, we're not ready to move out of planning yet. We need to stay in there. And then when we get into executing and monitoring and controlling, our outputs there are the final accepted deliverables, right? So that's what we expect to see. So we have different things coming in based on which phase we're coming from. All right. Our other inputs are the project management plan, because in the plan we put, how we close this out, how we accept our deliverables. We talked about acceptance criteria way back, probably in episode number 1, maybe episode number 2, I don't know. But in one of our earlier episodes, we tackled the acceptance criteria, how you know that the project is done, how you as a project manager and whoever the sponsor is can come to agreement and say, yes, it's done. You've achieved what we wanted to achieve. All right. And then we've got our organizational process assets, all the other information that's a part of our company's assets. Now, our tools and techniques, super straightforward on this one, right? Because what are we really doing? We're looking at those accepted deliverables and saying, are they good?
Yeah.
Right? Are we ready to transition to that next phase? And that's it. And the main way to do that is expert judgment, right? We use our mind powers, our Jedi mind powers, to evaluate the materials and make sure they meet our needs. If they don't, we find out what's missing and we correct it, right? That's why this is important to do after every phase. If you're trying to move into planning, but initiating is not done, you don't have authority for your project yet. If you don't have that charter in hand, you don't have authority. So you might do a bunch of work in planning, which costs money, time and money. And then whoever was supposed to give you authority comes in and says, wait, I didn't authorize this. What are you guys doing? You just wasted company time, right? That's the challenge. So we look and we say, based on my expert judgment, I'm missing these documents. We should not move forward, not until we have them, not until we have that official authorization. All right. Analytical techniques, same idea there. We just need to evaluate and ensure that is, what is meeting our needs. And you can use whatever techniques are appropriate for that particular phase. We'll see that's more important in closing procurements. And then meetings. It's a good idea to call a meeting together with the project team members who are still around and communicate to ensure that all the loose ends are tied up, because they may know of things that you don't. All right. Now, I made a comment there. I said the project team members that are still around. All right. In our human resources management plan, we defined not only how we acquire our team members, but how we release our team members. As you are moving through executing, there are times where you no longer need a team member. They've wrapped up the last activity assigned to them, last work package or whatever, and so you're done with them. Maybe it was a sub-project manager, and their sub-project is already done. Well, you can release them way back in the executing phase, somewhere in the middle, wherever they happen to be. So they may be gone. This meeting is going to be with the team members that are left. All right. If we had a project building a house, just because the house is done doesn't mean we've released everybody. We're still going to be holding on to some employees, at a minimum the project manager, and usually an accountant of some sort, because you're still settling financials. You'll still have some stakeholders hanging around, the sponsor in particular. So there'll still be at least a handful of people that are attached to the project by the time you reach this point. You may have a lot of people, right? If you're holding them to do final acceptance. NASA's a great example of that. When they launch that rocket into space, a lot of the team members are already done with their work, but they stick around to see it done. It's been a 10-year project. Let's see the final result. So you may still have all of your team members. It just depends. Now we have that meeting, and based on the results of it, if everyone is in agreement that the phase has reached its goals or the project as a whole has reached its goals, and the sponsor signs off on it, they accept the deliverable, they say, yes, this is what I want, and we are all done, then we're ready to wrap up. And so our output is the final product, right? The final product of what we set out to create. It could be a service, not a product, or it could be a transition, right? And by transition, this is at the end of a phase. So we transition from initiating to planning, or we transition from planning to executing, right? But if it's the end of the project, we have the final product or service, right? That's what comes out of this. You'll also have organizational process asset updates, our paperwork and other documents. So things like where the sponsor signs off to say, yes, I got what I want, I'm happy, you have no more obligation to me. The project, as far as I, the sponsor, am concerned, is over. Right? Now, just because the sponsor says it's over doesn't mean the project is actually over. You still have paperwork, you still have stuff to do. If you're done with the remainder of your team members, you need to release them. And that means either going back to the PMO and saying, hey, these team members are now available, or going to their functional managers and saying, hey, we're done with these guys, you can have them back to full-time or whatever, we don't need them anymore. You normally will accompany that with a review, an evaluation of that employee's performance. As you release the team members, you let their functional manager or you let the PMO know how they performed on the project. Did they do a great job? Would you recommend them again? What were your lessons learned? And they don't call that out specifically as an output here, but that's one of the big things that will come out of closing, is that you will create a lessons learned. you should have been building that all throughout your project. Your issue log is really what feeds that. And so it will have all the things that didn't quite go as planned, right? That there's some reason, we won't explain what that reason was, but why things didn't go right, what we did to fix it, how we got beyond that, so that we can add that to our organizational process assets, and our other project managers can look to that and benefit from our experience, and we can do the same with their projects. We look at their data and we learn and benefit there too.
Yeah, there's a lot of times in this particular process, it's very important during the phases to make sure that we close them out of. And the reason why, right, is because if we just go, okay, we're done with this phase, and we go ahead and we release employees and don't even think about it, and now all of a sudden somebody comes out and goes, wait a minute, we're not quite done yet. There's possibility that people that are working on our project are now assigned to other things, and now we can't call them back in, and now we're actually under more constraints than we realize. So closing out of every phase here, making sure that we do this properly, so we go, I didn't know you had reassigned that to somebody else that. Well, too late now. So that's why I'm making sure that this is done. So along the way, this is more important than we think.
Yeah, and as you release the employees, the last employee to be released is the project manager. You know, you're the last person to be released. So you want to make sure that you've wrapped up all of your loose ends. Now, one big area that we have that this doesn't really reflect are our contracts. Contracts have a way of living on beyond the project, right? So when you write a contract, one of the main things is your statement of work. What work needs to be done? And assuming that the contractor does the work, then it meets the statement of work, everything's done, the project is over, right? Or the contract is over, right? Well, you still have that whole issue of billing and paying and so on. So if the payment is late, then there's penalties. And I've seen this before where you contract with somebody for $10,000, and then what happens is the payment ends up late, and they assess an interest fee because of it. So when you do pay the $10,000, it turns out there was another $25 in interest charged. But you didn't pay that, you paid the $10,000. Now there's this outstanding charge of $25. And it's not a lot of money, but it kicks around, coming back to you every 30 days, you get a notification, eventually they send you to collections, things like that. And while your project is over, you've released all these employees, there's this outstanding debt that's now turning into a legal liability. That turns into a big mess. So our contracts have a dedicated process specifically for that, and that is the close procurements, all right? And it's really common sense. We take our project management plan and our procurement documents, right? So our actual contracts. And then we just do an audit. We look at the contract, we do an audit to see if it's been fulfilled. If it's fulfilled, we terminate the contract. We close it down, it's over, and it's done. And it's extremely important that you write a letter, not a phone call, not a conversation in the hallway, but write a letter to the other party saying, this bill has been paid in full. You guys did exemplary work, or you guys did terrible work, whatever. You guys did work, and we've accepted the deliverable, and this contract is now closed, right? By sending that to them, you're giving them, in no uncertain terms, the fact that you think the contract is closed. If they think otherwise, they'll let you know. This is our way of being sure, and get confirmation from them that they're in agreement to the contract is closed. You've paid the invoice, it's over, and it's closed. You want to make sure you get that in writing so that 3 months from now, 6 months, a year from now, if they come back and they say, wait a minute, this isn't right, you can say, look, we told you it was closed, you told us it was closed, it's done. That's water under the bridge, and now we move on, right? It helps to make sure that contract doesn't come back to haunt you. And in a project, remember that projects are not designed to be unending tasks, right? Because you have your project stuff, and then you have your regular run-of-the-mill work that's going on at your office, your ongoing activities. A project should never be unending. So when we draft contracts for our project, they should always terminate within the time of the project. But there are exceptions. A lot of times that contract that you enter into might include a warranty. So while you are getting somebody to come and pour the foundation, they say, we will warrant that foundation for 10 years. If any defects in the foundation occur, we'll fix it on our tab. Well, the project for building that house might only take a year, so your involvement in the contract is just in that first year. It's done, foundation's poured, house is built, house is sold, and it's gone. But there's 9 more years of warranty sticking around, right? So the contract is still alive, even though the project is over. So you need to plan for that. That's part of closing the procurements, is that we will need to change who the point of contact is, right? You as the project manager aren't attached to that house anymore, right? So you don't need to be the point of contact for that warranty. It needs to change to whoever the owner is or the functional manager, whoever it is that's going to be responsible for that entity. They become the person who runs that. You see this in like automotive plants. You might have a project to design the new assembly line procedures for, what car were we using? The Ford Focus? That's what it was. So you're designing the 2015 Ford Focus assembly line, right? Well, your project builds the assembly line. That's done. Now the assembly line has to kick in and work, and they'll manufacture that car for an entire year, and they'll make hundreds of thousands of that vehicle. Well, for that remaining year, you don't need to be the point of contact for all that equipment and service and maintenance. You plan for it, but you don't need to be the point of contact. It now transitions over to the functional managers, the people who are actually going to be operating that equipment on a daily basis. So that's part of closing our procurements, is wrapping up that stuff too. So the contract may live on, but you're not tied to it anymore. Your project is no longer tied to it. So we have to audit any contracts to look for areas like that, areas where stuff continues beyond the end of the project.
Yeah. A lot of times these audits also reveal where you thought that the contract, when it was developed during planning or during the initiation here, we said this is rock solid. And then as you start carrying the process through, you might say, this was really not something we really needed to include in here. And this is good, again, that goes into those lessons learned. So doing this particular auditing is a very important process for us, especially into the future.
Yep. And at this time, if there's anything extra that we want to negotiate in, we've got our procurement negotiations, you may want to extend that warranty beyond or whatever other types of services you might want to provide. Maybe there were some features you tried to add before and they said, let's push that off to another project. Well, we can start to kick some of that off, but you do not want to initiate a new project inside of this one. It does need to be a separate project. So those negotiations can happen and kind of start here, but not to be a part of the project. Your records management system is going to be important. You need to save a copy of every contract. Every single contract that you sign, you should save a copy, because the project is over, right? But if something ever resurfaces down the road, you start getting sent into collections for some reason, you need to be able to go and pull the record of that. So your records management system is where we're going to store that. All right. Our final outputs, well, a closed procurement. The contract, when it's been terminated, when it's over, is called a closed procurement. So we want to stamp that right on the front, closed. Contract is over, no more liabilities or outstanding debts or anything like that exist on the contract. It's now part of our history. And it goes into our organizational process assets. So that's where that ends up. When the last contract is closed and all of our objectives have been met and our sponsor signs off on the deliverable and everything is complete, that's the point where you as the project manager release yourself.
Right.
And now you go back into the PMO pool or out into the job market, if that's the kind of contract you were on, and you move on to your next project, right? This becomes a part of your history. Now, it is recommended that you create a very good document collection of your project. And one of the things that I do is I call it my project book. And so when the project is done, you collect your plan and all of your other paperwork, your quotes, your RFQs, RFPs, all that other stuff, and you collect it together into one big fat document. It might be electronic, mine usually are, just a bunch of PDFs, or it might be a physical book that you can hold on to. When it's done though, just be aware that that project book is not your property. It's the property of the company that you perform the project for. So if you leave that company and go work somewhere else, do not take that project book with you to use as a template, to say, I'll just use this as to mirror it for this next project, because it's full of information that pertains to the other company. So understanding the intellectual property rights of the data that you generate with a project is really important from the ethics side of things. And you may see questions on the exam regarding that. All right, so when that's done, we basically double back to our closed project or phase, and we ensure that everything's wrapped up, right? Again, using our expert judgment. We have any final meetings that we need to have with the sponsor, any other key stakeholders, anybody who needs to be involved, and now we're ready to shut it down. Now, they used to actually call out celebrate in here, and they did remove that, but it doesn't mean you can't, right? A lot of people do have an end of project celebration just to show, hey, we did it, we wrapped it up. An award ceremony recognition, I think we did see that in another process. But that's the kind of thing that happens at the end of the project. So Now, your project might have been a very short one, like our arcade cabinet build-out project, right? That's just a couple of weeks. Or it might be a massive project, like launching the Mars rover and exploring Mars, where it's expanded over 15 years now. Projects vary in size. So this closing phase could be very drawn out, could be very protracted if you've got a lot to wrap up. If you've got a ton of contracts, you might have to get lawyers involved before you close things down. That is not uncommon. But in small and medium-sized projects, closing is usually the blink of an eye. The risk here is if we don't do it, there's two main risks that they call out in the PMBOK. Risk number one is that the sponsor might not be satisfied with what they get. So you think the project is over, you wrap it up, and 3 months later the sponsor is like, this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right, you need to fix it. Well, you don't have your team anymore, everything's torn down, and now you've got a problem. And then the other side is outstanding contracts, right? So you have procurements that are still active that got overlooked. Payments didn't get issued. This is I mentioned it earlier, you tell the accounting department to cut a check, but if you don't follow up, you don't actually know if the check got issued or not. And so you might have something go into collections, your project is over, you walk away, and now the accounting department is dealing with a bill they don't understand. That's the kind of thing that can happen. So closing is very important.
Right.
All that being said, though, it does make up a very small portion of the final exam because, well, you guys see right here, I mean, we've got a maximum of 3 values in each of these. It is not a giant process area, so.
Yep.
All right, but with that is the final information involved in the PMP exam, the Project Management Professional exam.
Right.
So it's about time for us to wrap that up.
It is.
We need to go into our closing phase,
Yes,
right?
we do.
Do we have any outstanding contracts?
Probably just mine.
I don't think we're going to pay you anymore, Rodney, so I think that works out. So, that's basically it. Keep in mind, if you have any questions on any of this, because it was a ton, right? I mean, we went from initiating all the way into closing. If you have questions on any of it, definitely make sure you ask, right? You can go to itpro.tv/live if we're recording a show. Well, we're kind of wrapping this one up. So, but if we're live, you can post right in the chat room beneath the video. If you have questions about anything else, use the Q&A forums, right? Jump right in there. You'll see the link that says Q&A at the top of all of our pages. Takes you into the forums. You can post your questions there. We monitor and answer. So definitely take advantage of that. It is there for you. I feel like I'm leaving something out. What am I leaving out?
I can't think of anything.
All right. Well, let me just give you guys a couple of words of advice. First off, make sure you study hard. If you haven't already, I would get a copy of the PMBOK. If you just buy it outright, it's fairly expensive. I recommend you join the PMI. If you join the Project Management Institute, the 1-year membership fee will get you a free copy of the PMBOK, which is already worth it. But the other thing is it'll get you a discount on the exam that effectively pays for the 1 year of membership. So you save money by doing it, so I really do encourage you to do that. You also get access to webinars and all sorts of other things that help you to expand your knowledge. But that PDF copy of the PMBOK is really handy. Now, I've referred to it all throughout the show. Just remember that the PMBOK is not arranged in chronological order. It's not arranged in the order a project executes. So we did that during the show because it makes more sense, right? But if you break open their table of contents, you'll see where it's organized by knowledge area. So all of the scope management stuff is right there. Or let me jump down a little further. So you'll get like all of the scheduling is in one place. The planning for scheduling, the execution for scheduling, the monitoring, controlling for scheduling, and the closing for scheduling, all right in one chapter. And so it basically does the life cycle of the project from that perspective. And if you're trying to get the whole picture, that gets a little confusing. But if you're a team member and all you care about is the schedule, that's actually a good way to arrange it. You can read right through there and just see what you want. So depending on your need, that may be very valuable. The PMBOK is designed to be a reference that you grab off the shelf to look up something real quick. It's not designed to be a textbook you read cover to cover. So that's one of the challenges of learning. But I do recommend it, especially since it's where the test questions come from. This and the code of conduct that you can download from PMI. We posted links way back in episode number 1 on how to get that. Although there's another one. If you sign up for the PMI, they actually send you a copy of the code of conduct, the code of ethics. So you'll get a paper copy of that. It's 6-7 pages, not very big, so you can read it in one sitting pretty easy. All right, well, Ronnie, I think that's it.
I think that's it.
It's been a long road, but we made it. So, all right, well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Signing off for IT Pro TV, I'm Don Pizzette.
And I'm Ronnie Wong.
And we will see you next time.